Some people fish for fish, others fish for thoughts. Today I was thinking about something. The other day I caught myself doing a very simple thing. I was looking at an old conversation on my cell phone. Nothing important, nothing urgent, but there was a message there that stayed kind of in the middle of the way. It wasn't exactly a farewell, it wasn't exactly a continuity, it was just something in the open. And without noticing, I started to go back into the conversation, read again, pay attention to the tone, the words, the small details, as if in some place there were a hidden answer. As if looking with enough attention I could finally understand what that meant. And the most curious thing is that nothing had changed. The conversation was the same, but my head wouldn't stop, trying to fit that into some sense. And perhaps you have already done this too, not exactly with a message, but with some situation, a conversation that didn't stay clear, a silence that you didn't understand, an attitude of someone that didn't make much sense, and suddenly that stays in your head, coming back, repeating, as if your mind were trying to resolve something that stayed in the open. Because there is one thing that we do the whole time, almost without noticing. We try to understand everything. The human mind, she has a kind of obsession for closure. She doesn't like loose ends. She likes answers, categories, labels. When something stays in the open, it's like an open tab on a computer, consuming energy, processing in the background. And we have this feeling that if we think a bit more, if we analyze a bit more, if we find the right answer, the discomfort will disappear. But what if the answer simply doesn't exist? Or worse, what if she exists but doesn't change anything? Sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to explain why something happened or why someone acted in a certain way, as if the explanation were a prize. But the explanation, many times, is just a construction that we create to feel safe, to feel that we have control over the chaos. But life, she doesn't always have a script. Things happen, people change, silences exist, and not everything needs a definitive translation. There is a philosopher, Nietzsche, who spoke about something called active forgetting. It is not simply forgetting because you have a bad memory, but the ability to not let the past continue consuming the present. He said that without the ability to forget, we wouldn't be able to live in the now. And that is very true, because while you are trying to understand what has already passed, you are absent from what is happening. You are trying to organize a ghost, while the life itself, she is moving. This need to understand everything, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's what makes us evolve, learn, find solutions. But on the other hand, it's a prison, because we feel that we only have the right to be well when we understand. We only have the right to move on when everything is explained. And the result of this is a constant mental fatigue. You end the day tired not because you worked a lot with your body, but because you spent the day trying to solve puzzles that perhaps don't even have pieces. And then comes a question. What if we simply stop trying to understand? What if we allowed the not knowing to exist? It sounds strange, right? It sounds like we are giving up or being superficial. But there is a huge freedom in not needing to have an answer for everything. When you accept that you don't know why someone moved away, or why a plan didn't work out, or why you feel a certain way today, a space opens up. That mental tab that was open, consuming energy, she closes. Not because you found the answer, but because you realize that you don't need it. And it's in this space that a silent tranquility appears. It's like when you stop trying to fix a sound that is bothering you, and you just let the sound be there. After a while, you don't even notice it anymore. The problem wasn't the sound, it was your fight against it. And this also applies to how we look at ourselves. We spend a lot of time trying to understand our own contradictions. Why did I do that? Why do I feel this way? We want a logic for our feelings, as if we were a mathematical equation. But we are not. We are a flow, and a flow doesn't need to be understood to happen. He just happens. If we look at Eastern thought, for example, there is a very present idea about non-action or not striving. It's not about being passive, but about not forcing things to be what they are not. When you force an understanding, you are trying to mold reality to your desire for certainty. But reality is much larger than our categories, and this constant attempt to understand everything also creates a very heavy weight in relationships. We want to understand the other, explain the other, decipher the other. But the more we try to decipher, the less we see the person. We see only our interpretations. When we stop needing to understand the other, we can finally meet the other. Because now we are not looking for an answer, we are looking for a presence. And maybe that's it. Maybe the secret to a lighter life is not in finding all the answers, but in losing the fear of the questions. It's in realizing that the not knowing is not a vacuum. It's a space of possibilities. When you don't know, you don't define. And when you don't define, you don't limit. There is an image that I like a lot, which is a person sitting on a bridge. Below, the river is passing. The person can try to jump into the water to try to hold the flow, try to understand where each drop goes, or she can simply stay on the bridge, watching the water pass. The river will continue being a river, and the person will continue being a person. The only difference is that the one who stays on the bridge is at peace. And that doesn't mean we should be alienated or indifferent. No, it means knowing how to choose our battles. There are things that are worth understanding that help us grow, but there are things that are only noise, and the wisdom is in knowing how to distinguish one from the other. When you start to practice this not needing to understand, something curious happens. You become more observant, because before you weren't observing, you were judging, categorizing. Now you just see. You see the silence, you see the distance, you see the change. And seeing is much deeper than understanding. Because seeing is direct, understanding is always a bypass through the mind. This change of perspective, it's not something that happens from night to day. It's a practice. It's noticing when your mind starts to go into that loop of analysis and simply saying, okay, I don't know the answer, and that's fine. It's like letting go of a rope that you were pulling with a lot of force. At the beginning, the hand even hurts, but then comes the relief of no longer needing to pull. The freedom of not knowing is exactly that. It's the relief of not needing to be the judge of your own life or the interpreter of the world. It's realizing that life, she is happening right now, regardless of whether you understand it or not. The sun rises without you understanding the fusion of atoms. The blood circulates without you understanding biology. The feelings pass without you understanding psychology. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all this is that when we stop trying to understand, we start to feel more. Because the mind, she is like a filter that dims the intensity of experience. When the mind silences the why, the heart can feel the what. What is happening now? What is the sensation of this moment? So, next time you catch yourself in an old conversation, or trying to decipher someone's silence, or trying to find a logic for a discomfort, try for a moment to just stay with the not knowing. Don't run to the first explanation that appears. Stay in the open. At the beginning, it's uncomfortable. It's like being in a dark room. But then, your eyes start to get used to it. And you realize that even in the dark, there are things to see. There is a texture. There is a temperature. There is a presence. And that presence, she is much more real than any explanation you could invent. Because in the end, we are not here to resolve life. We are here to live life. And living is an open experience without a final period, without a summary at the bottom of the page. It's a text that is being written while it's being read. And that's okay. In fact, that's the beauty of it. The freedom of not knowing is the freedom of being, without labels, without demands, without the weight of having to be right. It's just being. Like the river that doesn't know where it's going, but doesn't stop flowing for that reason. Like the bird that doesn't understand the physics of flight, but doesn't stop flying. And when you allow yourself that, life starts to have a different rhythm, a rhythm that is no longer dictated by the anxiety of the mind, but by the natural movement of things. You become lighter, more present, more human, not because you found the truth, but because you stopped needing it so much. And that's where the real freedom is, not in the answer, but in the absence of the search, not in the understanding, but in the perception. It's a strange freedom, it's true, but it's one of the few that really brings peace. And this feeling, when it starts to occupy space, living stops being a task, stops being a goal, and starts to be something much simpler and at the same time more profound. There is not a necessity to have absolute certainty, necessity of total control. There exists only the movement of existing with the questions, with the doubts, with the small insecurities. Living, perhaps, is this: walking without having all the answers, feeling without understanding completely, existing even without knowing exactly why. And the curiously is in this not knowing that the experience seems more alive. Because when everything is defined, there doesn't exist the discovery. When everything is certain, there is no surprise. But when there still exists the question, there still exists openness. And perhaps, in the background, life she is not an answer. She is just this succession of silent questions that continue while you are here. Well, if this flow of thought it made sense for you, I invite you here to comment, bring your perception, in what way you have been leading the Share Yearnings teachings. And of course, feel free.